So, The Garden of Words is an anime movie that came out in 2013. I don't fully remember when I personally watched it, but it was around the time I was getting into anime. I'm 9% sure that this was one of the first movies that I watched that was actually an anime, and at the time I didn't fully understand it. Probably because I was super impatient, so I skipped most of it. But watching it recently, it's a big shock. I really enjoyed this movie because of how simple the story is, yet the concepts are quite complex. It's a pleasant surprise to be sure, and I thought I should review it as it takes less time to consume movies in general, and there are some bangers out there, and I'd say this is one of them. Now I will say, because there is a lot less content, I'll have to dive into spoiler territory, so fair warning that there are spoilers in this video. Without further ado, let's dive into The Garden of Words. We start off with our male protagonist, Takao Akizuki. He's a school student who strives to become a shoemaker in the future, and he practices his skills at home. He also works a part-time job to save up some money. Now Takao is a regular student, and he's not special in any regard, and if anything he's just a bad student because he has a rule that if it rains, as he makes his way to the train station, he decides not to go and instead goes somewhere else until it stops. You could say that this habit is just laziness, but I believe he actually enjoys listening to it while relaxing and drawing some shoe designs in his textbook. Seemingly out of nowhere, a woman who's our female protagonist, Yukari Yukino, a school teacher who is unknown to Takao at the time, appears and sits next to him in a gazebo that he frequents when it rains. She also has the habit to skip her day under similar circumstances, and as I'll explain later, this causes problems for the both of them. Anyways, while they don't interact with each other for the first time, Takao has his eyes glued to her feet, and no, it's not because he has a foot fetish, you dirty-minded individuals. As I mentioned before, he wants to be a shoemaker, and incidentally he wants to make women's shoes, but because he doesn't have many friends nor go to his school a lot, especially during rain season, he doesn't have a model to make his projects accurate. Yukino, however, just likes to go there because of the scenery, and she has a weird diet of beer and chocolate, which actually has some reasoning to it later on. Either way, they leave and go home, but seem to find each other there whenever it rains, and the more they see each other, the more talkative they become, and it becomes a ritual of sorts for them in their daily lives. Now before I dive further into the movie, I'll give the animation an 8 out of 10. I know I'm going a bit out of order to our previous videos, but I think now's a better time than any to talk about how beautiful it is. To be honest, it's not the best animation that I've seen in movies, but for what the movie is, they really did the environment visuals especially really well. It puts you in a relaxing environment where the rain is the only piercing noise when music isn't playing, and I think it's a great way to place emphasis on it, especially because of how important rain is to the overall story. Before diving further into the story, I feel as though I should mention that Yukino tells something to Takao on the first time that they meet. A faint clap of thunder, clouded skies. Perhaps rain comes. If so, will you stay here with me? This is a tanka, which is a form of Japanese poetry. It's important not only because it's mentioned later, but because it further emphasizes the importance of rain for both the characters. We later learn that it's not only the reason they meet, but also what keeps them together, and it's a wonderful way to use something simple into an expression of love. Also yes, I am aware that Takao is 15 and Yukino is 27, get over it. Continuing on, we also learn that Takao's brother lives with him, and his mother left to go find another boyfriend. This causes Takao to take on a lot of responsibility, as he's usually the one making food for himself and his brother, and like I said before, he has a part-time job that he uses to pay for rent. Similarly, Yukino has issues of her own that are of a different nature. Remember when I said that she drinks beer and eats chocolate with it? Well, it's because she has a hard time tasting food. This gets a bit better, and coincidentally it's after she meets Takao. Skipping a bit forward, Takao decides to make Yukino a pair of shoes, so she lets him take her measurements. While this might seem insignificant, think about this for a minute. Takao is a school student who has to work a part-time job and also works towards his dream. Yes, he might be skipping school, but he's quite mature for his age. Yukino, on the other hand, does the same, but she has a bigger job, and for a 27-year-old adult, she doesn't seem to be handling things as she should. This is another big part of the movie, as it tries to put forward the idea that even adults can be like scared teenagers. As the story progresses, Takao finds out that not only is Yukino a teacher, but she works at his school. He didn't know this, of course, because whenever he skipped, so did she, and he never saw her there. But them meeting is not because of anything good. It turns out that the main reason that Yukino was skipping her job was because she was being harassed by her students due to a misunderstanding and is now changing schools. Takao doesn't take this nicely, but first he tries to find out who hurt her and attempts to teach them a lesson. I'm sure I don't need to tell you how that goes. Either way, he finds Yukino at the place they meet when it rains, and due to a big storm, she leads him into her apartment. At this point, Takao is certain of what he feels and confesses to Yukino that he loves her. This doesn't exactly go the way that he wanted and decides to leave, but before he could leave completely, Yukino stops him after realizing that she feels the same way. Takao throws all his emotions on the table, and despite telling her how much he hates her for deceiving him and never telling him the truth, Yukino breaks down in his arms and confesses in her own way. I'll be honest, I didn't cry at this scene, but it sure was emotional. You get really immersed in this story and you care what happens to the two main protagonists. To finish the story, Yukino still leaves, but Takao sends her a letter promising her that he'll find her again in the future when he's older, and he'll have a pair of shoes ready for her when he's furthered his career. That's pretty much the full story of the Garden of Words. Oh, and by the way, there's a response to Yukino's tanka which Takao says, "A faint clap of thunder, even if rain comes not, I will stay here together with you." Before I get into breaking down the meaning of the movie, I'll give the rest of the ratings. By the way, I don't break down the meaning of the movie in this video at all. I kind of forgot to do it while I was writing the script. But you know, it's 3 AM, so you're gonna watch this video and you're gonna like it. And maybe subscribe as well. Story gets a 9 out of 10, characters get an 8 out of 10, action, which I am substituting for drama or other things, gets a 9 out of 10, and finally sound gets a 9 out of 10. I know I'm rating this really high, but I do think this was a beautiful movie. There's really no issues I had with it other than maybe the length of it, standing at a rather short 46 minutes. This is because I think they could have made the connections a bit more real if they showed more of them connecting, but other than that, it was amazing. There's so many meanings and interpretations that you can get from it, such as how the story is an analogy for learning to walk as the characters find themselves by being together. And even though there's the obvious age difference, they never went any deeper than a love confession, which I'm perfectly fine with, especially when it comes to today's anime. Well anyways, while I'd love to talk more about this, I'm going to end the video here. We have an overall of 43 out of 50, and while I am aware that the structure of this video was very weird compared to our previous ones, this is the first movie review we have on here, so I hope you still enjoyed it for what it was. If there's any other anime series or movie you'd like us to review, then be sure to pop it down in the comments below, and of course don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next review.